Hi, I'm Craig Collins. This is the What the Warehouse show. With me today, I have Matthew Haber. I'm not sure if you pronounce it like that, Matt.
Yeah, that's
Um,
correct.
Great. Matthew's from Cofactor, and they're a really interesting and exciting founded or startup company. And I'll let Matthew tell us what he does.
Thanks for having me, Craig. So Cofactor provides supply chain automation technology and third-party logistics services powered by that technology for companies that are manufacturing electronic devices. So typically in high compliance industries, we work a lot with aerospace, defense, medical device manufacturers to replace a lot of traditionally manual processes for them related to sourcing and managing their electronic component inventory.
Right. So that's really cool. Tell me about the technology that you're using. How do you pull this together at a technical level?
Yeah. So we see sort of like three main areas that we think about. One is the flow of information and data, right? So we do a lot of work around ERP integrations, integrations with other warehouse management systems, engineering software integrations, and then crucially integrations with the broader supply chain. So we have basically pre-enabled trading partnership data exchanges with hundreds of distributors covering hundreds of millions of different components. So we're pulling in real time data from all of those, which allows us to automate a lot of these processes. Also, because we're a very verticalized solution, we're really just focused on these kinds of components. We already have technical data on hundreds of millions of different parts, which allows us to sort of pre-fill a lot of information, automate a lot on top of that. There's a commerce element, so we automate a lot of the procurement activities. So sending POs, managing quotes. We're using artificial intelligence to extract data out of emails from suppliers and parse that. And then finally, the actual flow of physical materials. So because we know so much about these materials, we're able to automatically figure out what quality control checks they need to be routed through, what kind of storage conditions they need, what information needs to be tracked about them. And that allows us to either in our own facility or our customers' warehouses significantly streamline a lot of the operations that might need to happen that would traditionally involve a lot of humans doing that work.
Right. I just want to get a very basic understanding of it. So you've got a customer who's an electronic manufacturer and they're sourcing certain parts. So they would come to you to basically outsource the sourcing of the parts, correct?
Yeah, so their sourcing team will still be involved, but they're using our software to automate a lot of
Right.
those manual processes. And they're also, to the extent that they want to, pushing off some of that human element as well onto our team as an outsourced provider of those services.
Right. So then from your warehouse or your third-party logistics warehouse facility, are you bringing the stuff into order and basically consolidating orders from multiple customers? And then are you also bringing in stock for based on forecasts?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're taking the customers across all our customers, taking their technical data, so their bills of materials, the lists of the hundreds or thousands of different parts that go into their products. We're taking their demand forecasts around, we're going to make 10,000 of this widget next quarter or whatever. And then we're essentially aggregating all that purchasing, buying from hundreds of different suppliers, bringing all those materials together, storing those in consigned inventory per customer, performing whatever quality control inspections, things like that they need on those materials, and then right on schedule, releasing kits of the correct quantities of each of these parts to whatever their production line is, whether that's a third party contract manufacturer or their own production line.
It's stupendously complex in the amount of data, etc. But it's an elegant solution. And if you can get the data correct and the forecasting correct, you can have a massive impact on their supply chain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We try to be a very simple feeling experience, right? For the
Right.
customer. The idea is that it feels very sort of holistic, it's end to end, but also, extremely flexible and fits in with their requirements. But you're right, under the hood, it's an extremely complicated undertaking. We certainly like bit off kind of every possible complex aspect of doing this. But we think ultimately, if you're willing to tackle all of them at once, you're able to deliver a much more sort of unified and effective experience to the end customer.
Sure. So how did you get into this? Compared to me with my gray hair, you don't look like you've been around in supply chain for millions of years. How did you
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
into
well,
the game?
there's a little bit of gray hair, but it doesn't show up on Zoom so much. It's on the sides. But yeah, so my co-founder and I previously worked in engineering services. We ran an engineering consulting firm, essentially building electronic hardware, mechanical devices, software development across a bunch of different industries, automotive, things like that. sold that company to private equity. And coming out of that experience, we had sort of been on the customer side of this. We'd been responsible for helping figure out how you get products through that new product introduction phase and get them ready for scaled production. And we were frustrated by that experience, compared to building software where there's really awesome tools and ecosystems around you. It's a lot harder if you're building electronic devices. And so we felt like there was an opportunity there. We spent some time running a contract manufacturer as well. So that got us very deep and hands-on for a time, being on the contract manufacturer side for circuit boards, assembling circuit boards, figuring out how you source all the parts that are going to go on those circuit boards. And so we started developing a lot of the software that ultimately became Cofactor, really as an internal set of tools for ourselves as a contract manufacturer to try to automate all these processes. And then pretty quickly realized we didn't really want to be a contract manufacturer. Existing ones are really good at contract manufacturing, and we didn't think we were bringing a lot of value on the assembly side, but that a lot of the software was really useful and probably in and of itself should be kind of the product and service.
Right. So what is your physical coverage? I mean, you obviously have these warehouse facilities. What is your current physical coverage, and how do you intend to expand that?
Yeah, so right now it's pretty small, and that's partially because we deal with parts that are very small. So we have about 5,000 square feet of very climate controlled, super clean, electrostatically controlled storage. That's about 200 feet that way through a wall. And we have a lot of very sort of specific capabilities there in terms of, X-ray machines for counting electronic components and a semiconductor anti-counterfeiting lab under this roof, a fair amount of capabilities around sort of repackaging and stuff. And then obviously all of it is, everything's very barcoded and RFID and very carefully controlled and managed. 5,000 square feet can store, literally billions and billions and billions of parts. So when they're as small as an electronic component. Expansion plan really is sort of twofold. One is we expect that we'll open additional facilities, throughout the US, probably internationally to some degree. But then the other thing we're doing, and we're starting to roll this out with some customers now, is really sort of warehouse within a warehouse model, where we're deploying within a customer's existing facility, really right next to their production line, the same technology suite and a sort of managed experience for their supply chain. But that's, literally next door under the same roof as their existing assembly machine. So that's right where they need it, but it's specific to that customer's requirements.
That's a brilliant idea. Brilliant idea. I've done quite a bit of work in electronic manufacturing and, managing the sort of spools of resistors and issuing exactly. And each one is tracked serially. It's really, really a high data intensive type of transaction. Your plans for international, I love the business idea. And are there specific sort of plans? Is there a roadmap for international growth?
Yeah, so we already have a handful of customers in Canada, and we definitely, because of, I think, free trade situations and various reasons, there's a fair amount of electronics manufacturing in both Canada and Mexico. Also for tariff reasons, there's some benefits to not having those materials pass through the US, especially when they're, coming from China. It seems quite possible that sort of a first international location would be in Canada. We've also been getting a fair amount of interest recently from Indian contract manufacturers and EMS providers in India. I think with, again, the sort of international relations situation with China and the tariff situation with China, there's been a big push with a lot of from the customer side to move more of their electronic assembly to India and some other, lower cost markets in Asia. And they have a lot of challenges around sort of their distribution networks and logistics. They're much less well developed than they are in China and some of those parts of Southeast Asia. So I think there's also some opportunity either in or near India to do something there. So those are where we're looking most actively at the moment, but probably will be physically domestic for at least a little while longer.
Right. Do you have any specific sort of preference in terms of what electronic devices your customers are manufacturing? Do you see a slew towards medical or transmission equipment or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I would say like we don't say we have a preference. I would say that the customers probably have a preference towards us if they're in what we call like regulated industries. So we have a number of customers in aerospace and defense. We have customers in medical device manufacturing, customers building kind of big life safety critical autonomous systems. So we have a bunch of customers that build, big agricultural robots, self-driving tractors and things like that.
Right.
So these tend to be
Right.
customers who have very complicated supply chains. There's thousands and thousands of parts that they're needing to manage. They are frequently redesigning and having to deal with kind of a lot of volatility in their engineering requirements. They have a regulatory regime they're operating under where they need traceability. They need a very clear data audit trail, right? Which can traditionally be incredibly labor intensive to maintain. With us, it's really not. Like, it's sort of just out of the box, you get that. And so there tends to be a good fit there. These companies that are making kind of low to mid volume products of a high degree of complexity. Where we haven't done as much work as, let's say, consumer electronics, where it might actually be somewhat simpler, but just super high volume. And that can those supply chains have a slightly different makeup, right? Different shape of a supply chain. And so the solution set can look a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just like, my mind's whizzing around because of thinking of some of my customers. One of my customers in Cape Town, in fact, is an aerospace manufacturer, and they're making components for satellites. And really, their warehouse is tiny; it's the size of my living room, and yet every single component is uniquely tracked and managed. And as you say, with barcoding in that instance, as opposed to RFID. But a really cool environment to deploy technology. That's awesome. What are the ERP systems that your current systems integrate to?
Yeah, so we have an integration library that covers most of the major ones. So SAP, NetSuite, Odoo are popular ones with our customers. On the sort of more startup end of our customer base, it might be a QuickBooks or a Xero, something where it's less of an ERP integration, more of an accounting data integration. Our system itself provides some ERP adjacent functionality, I would say, again, really just specifically for electronic components. But for some customers, will use our system as kind of a source of truth for their inventory data, and then they can extract that information for accounting purposes. Bigger customers or customers with existing ERP implementations will use that as source of truth and then can bidirectionally exchange data. Microsoft Dynamics Nav is another example there. We have a number of customers that use that. So the sort of common ones, we have an open integration framework where we can exchange data all the normal ways. So, CSVs, VFTP, SQL servers, synchronizing, via API. So there's a lot of different options, and we typically, as you get to that more mid-market customer, there's some level of like custom implementation to make sure all the systems are talking the way they want them talking.
Yeah. A couple of final questions, because I do need to wrap up, but I'd love to come and see what you guys are doing. But tell me around things like, my mind is spinning with the possibilities. Do you see an expansion into other supply chains? I know electronics makes sense for you, but I'm assuming that your software would fairly easily go into other verticals if you wanted it to.
Yeah, so we cover sort of what I'd call like proximal commodity classes right now for customers. So enclosure components, wire harness supplies, things that are similar but not quite the same, right? But maybe have a similar set of considerations. I think we definitely are open and continually exploring the possibility of supporting other types of materials. Our general philosophy is like, the thing we think is different about us than most sort of horizontal solutions that cover any kind of material is that because we're able to preload the system with all this data about all these materials, we can cut out a lot of data entry, we can automate a lot of processes, we can automatically avoid a lot of sort of mistakes in the system, right? And so as we think about expanding, we want to make sure that we can deliver a comparable experience for these other kinds of materials, right? So a next one might be like fasteners, right? Okay, huge number of different fasteners, especially aerospace, things like that. Can we go ingest all these supplier catalogs, preload a data set of hundreds of millions or billions of different parts of this data, and then we can feel confident that we're delivering a comparable experience for our customer. And so that's what we're always thinking about is like, we absolutely want to expand, but we want to make sure that we maintain the same kind of really clean automatic experience for our customers as we do that.
Yeah. One industry that comes to mind is drug and pharmaceutical manufacturer. It's got similar complexity, similar regulatory problems, and similar amount of data that you could harness and inject into your system. Yeah,
I think long term for sure. All of these sound great to us.
It really sounds like you guys are one of these real up and coming startups that can create incredible things. I see you've got some initial investment already, and are you seeing sort of massive growth as a result?
Yeah, it's definitely going well. I think, it's a complicated product, which means it can take a while for people to get to a comfort level, right? So among like earlier stage startups that don't have a bunch of legacy systems to navigate or legacy processes to navigate, it's a very easy, onboarding. The sales pitch is really easy. It's a pretty straightforward process. As we work with kind of bigger companies, people are definitely interested and excited. Certainly the pain points we solve for are pretty universal across this space, and people are pretty aware of the problems they're having. It's just about how we work with these customers to get them to a comfort level of working with a startup to outsource such business critical parts of their operation, and then how we align different parts of our solution to their specific pain points. So it's not an overnight process because supply chain is a big complicated thing, but definitely like we're excited by the growth and excited by the support we've received from the venture markets as well.
Right. So, Cofactor, a really, really interesting company to follow. They've got a really interesting software suite, huge capability, AI, and they get involved in the physical world, which is, something that frustrates me about so many startups today is everyone's in this mental space of creating amazing software, but no one's doing stuff with their hands. And you guys are crossing that border by having a warehouse as well. So definitely going to be keeping tracks keeping tabs on the company and looking forward to seeing how you guys grow and carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an exciting time for sure for all of us.
Absolutely. Matt, just for people to get hold of you, the company, I assume just get onto the web, cofactor.com. Yeah.
Yep. COFACTR.com. And of course, you can always find me on, LinkedIn and personally message me. We're a small enough company that I'm always happy to talk to anyone.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for tuning in today to What the Warehouse Show, and Matthew Haber from Cofactor. Thank you very much for chatting to us.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg.